to conclude our conversation, I want to put you, maybe it's a difficult question, but still I want to try to understand. So from what we talked about right now, how do you think Putin is the new Hitler, or actually he's more new Stalin? Because if we look to his attitude towards his own population, it's mostly like Stalin's behavior and actions. So maybe Hitler and Stalin in one phase anyways. What outcome is worthy of such a historical example of inheritance in the 21st century, and how the world security architecture will look after this all ends?
Well, I would say that the Putin is much more like Hitler, for all the reasons I've already mentioned. The Russian Federation resembles Nazi Germany. Russian ideology resembles Nazi ideology. Putin resembles Hitler in terms of his antics, in terms of his behavior, and so on. I mean, so I could go on in that regard. But I think the comparison with Nazi Germany is much more appropriate. That's not to say that one can't compare Hitler with Stalin. One can, of course, but it's just Hitler really comes to mind, and Mussolini perhaps even more. So I would focus, as we began this discussion with the conversation on Russism, and I think the fascist angle, the fascist point of view, is something we need to keep in mind here. In terms of what the implications of all this will be for security, well, if, as I believe, Ukraine will win, and if, as I also believe, the Putin regime will collapse, and the Russian Federation will either become much weaker or perhaps even fall apart, then whatever the circumstances, Russia will no longer be quite the great power it claims to be. It will still have nuclear weapons, and it will presumably still have a seat on the United Nations Security Council, but it won't be considered a great power by anyone anymore. In contrast, Ukraine will become not exactly a great power, but a regional player. It will become much more important for the security architecture of Europe and possibly of Eurasia as well. Whether that's good or bad news for Ukraine, I don't know, but it will change significantly the way in which alliances are formed. Countries like China, countries like Iran, countries like India, and of course the European Union will have to be much more attentive to Ukraine. And in contrast, Russia, whatever its circumstances, is likely to become much more of a supplier of mineral resources, sort of a backward, underdeveloped country which provides coal, oil, and gas, and isn't quite fully integrated with the international community. So one can see major changes taking place if and when Ukraine wins and if and when Russia loses.